Alright, so we got kind of backed up on our schedule a little bit, so this isn't nearly the amount of movies that I wanted to be talking about right now. I still wanted to see The Woman King and see how they run and stuff like that. All that was supposed to be here, but I just didn't get around to it, so we're just kind of having the very underwhelming gathering of these three movies, and we'll hopefully get to those soon enough. Let's go ahead and start with Don't Worry, Darling, which is the next movie by Olivia Wilde after Booksmart, which I love and love more and more with time. And apparently this is, it's obviously this sort of mysterious thriller, and I guess it started off as one script, and then the screenwriter for Booksmart kind of reworked it. And with her and Wilde, and then this is what it is now. I'm not quite sure what all the differences in there would be, but I do think it was two dudes that initially wrote it. So the idea of a woman kind of taking over this story, I do wonder how that sort of changes the perspective given what the subject matter of the movie is. So naturally, we're in this sort of 1950s looking era, and everything looks really sort of, clean and sort of paradise-like, but of course there's this whole quality of things being 1950s-esque as far as the way women are treated and how they're sort of seen as below everything. They just sort of clean the house and go about their business, while the dudes that are all around are the ones that are making everything happen, everything in control, where everything sort of has like this sort of subliminal cult kind of vibe, where it's like they're going and they're just like doing yoga or something, and somebody says there is beauty in control, and stuff like that. So it's like you kind of get the sense that there's something sort of subliminal happening as far as the way women are sort of under control in this particular area. And yeah, so I guess to start off immediately, something that was kind of sticking out was I don't know if it was so much casting, or just kind of the very polished look of the movie in general, but despite this 1950s aesthetic, it does feel like there's this sort of distractedly modern quality about it, as far as like when you look at Harry Styles versus, Florence Pugh, and it's like, Florence Pugh has obviously done period movies before, and of course Styles was in Dunkirk and stuff like that, but even so, even though Styles is very good in his small part in Dunkirk, and it does fine here, I do think there's he almost has like a too modern look to him, where you can kind of tell that he was replaced kind of last minute, when all the Shia stuff went down. But there's also the case of, like, Nick Kroll. I don't understand exactly why people in casting seem to think that Nick Kroll is suited for period movies after this and Loving. Because he's also somebody where it's like I can only just kind of see him in this sort of modern sense. So that right away was like the aesthetic of the movie was kind of to that point where you could sense what they were going for. But it just feels like it's not quite reaching there, and it does feel like everything does feel like sort of like a production, rather than us really being in a particular place or a particular era. There is, and there may be cases where you think, maybe that's intentional, but yeah, I don't think that's really the vibe I was getting from that. It's just sort of, right away it feels more like I said, they didn't quite capture what they were going for, I don't think, visually. And speaking of visually, there is the whole idea of giving moments of intrigue to this mystery. So there's a lot of random visions that we see, and random visions that Pugh's character has. And you do get the sense that these were here as a means of, like, intrigue. Like, the more random visions you see, the more you're going to think, like, oh, like, what's happening? I must know the next thing that's going to happen. I must know what it means. But for the most part, I just wasn't... It was one of those cases where I think that method is so overused throughout the movie. It's so overused that we see those images over and over again. As very nicely put together as the visuals are, it just doesn't have that intrigue to it. I just could not give a shit what any of that meant, because it's like you just kind of, it feels like this very sort of I just had the word in my mouth and then I lost it. But it's them really going for that sort of intrigue thing, and it just doesn't. It just has the complete opposite effect. And it's like, yeah, I get what you're doing. I get that you're trying to set up intrigue, and that's all that it feels like. It doesn't feel like the intrigue itself. So that was kind of unfortunate. Like I said, I think a lot of that just comes from how overused those visuals were. So, like, if it had just been, like, every now and then, or it maybe sort of unexpected or unpredictable moments, that would have been a different effect, and they would have maybe gotten more of the vibe they were going for. But we're just sort of bombarded with that, and then as it goes on, to add on to that, everything gets very sort of on the nose very quickly, where, like, everything gets spelled out, where it's like, when, like, instead of her feeling like, oh, she's claustrophobic, and like just kind of setting this claustrophobic feel as it goes. There's literally a scene where she's washing a window and she has a vision that the wall has pushed her up against it and caved in. It's like, well, that couldn't have been more literal. And then there's a point in time where you think, like, oh, the mood and the atmosphere could make it feel like, oh, she's suffocating. She's really suffocating in this world. There's literally a vision where she's just her head is encased in plastic, and it's like, Jesus Christ, could you give us a second to think for ourselves for like just a little bit? It's like aggressively wants to get all of its point across, and it seems to think you're a fucking idiot. And it's like, this is the theme, this is what we're saying, and it's really there. And there's so much, like, it's so aggressively on the nose that it's annoying as it goes on, which sucks because you could tell that Wilde did find a mood here, and it's a mood that definitely could have told the story by itself, without them just literally beating us over the head with what's being said. And that's the thing, too, is talking about how much it seems to really want to be intriguing by showing us really seemingly unrelated images, to make us say, oh, what does it mean? But at the same time, regardless of how much they do that, this movie feels like it's so desperate to tell its secrets. Like, it can't wait to tell us everything that it's hiding. So all of the clues just feel really, really obvious and really, really spelled out. And it's, like I said, almost spelled out to the point that I don't even know what's a spoiler or not. I was trying to be very careful earlier. And it's, and it's like, I honestly don't know what they want you to know and what they don't want you to know, because they seem to want to be mysterious and intriguing, but they also are, like, just screaming at you, hey, this is what it is. And then that's the problem, too, is it's like, as it goes on, you think, okay, so if it seems this obvious now, there must be more to it. There must be more that they got up their sleeve, or more that they're hiding. But not really. Like, almost jarringly so. Not really. It's like, it does feel very just sort of the word that just kept coming to mind as I was coming out of this was unsatisfying. Just like just around every turn is something that could have been there, and then it's just something ultimately unsatisfying. And I think it doesn't help also that it just feels like so many different things. Where it's like, it feels like there's a very original movie in here somewhere, but all of the pieces are just so familiar. Like, everything from The Stepford Wives, or Last Night in Soho, or Black Swan, or whatever. Just anything, like any movie where the main character is uncertain of their reality. Something was pretty much plucked from those movies and just put into this one. And then it's just sort of this mixing of all that. So it's like, everything feels very familiar. Everything also feels very, very repetitive. Like I said, to the sense that, like, when you see her and all the other wives going through their lives, and it's like, you get the sense that there's an intentional repetitive nature to this. There's even the whole thing where it's like, all the guys get into their cars at the same time, go to their same job, and there's the shot of all of them leaving while all the wives are behind, and it's like, that's just literally shots from Edward Scissorhands. And it's like, Edward Scissorhands was basically saying the same thing, and Edward Scissorhands wasn't even completely a movie about that sort of thing, like that theme. It just kind of happened to be part of that world, to where it was kind of going for that sort of 1950s vibe a little bit. And yeah, everything here feels like it's, you know, been treaded on already. And it's that case where I was talking about the repetitiveness, where it's like you can get the sense of what they're trying to do, to where it's like that's the point. Like, it's essentially, if you go through this enough, somebody's gonna reach a breaking point. And Florence Pugh is the perfect actress for that role, where she's at the center of all this chaos. She's the only one that seems to see what's going on, and she'd either be losing her mind or everybody around her is crazy. And it's like she's pretty much perfected this at this point. But when you get to that repetitiveness, it feels less like, oh, I feel like the character. I feel like I'm losing my mind like the character. I feel like I'm reaching a breaking point like the character. It just feels like, movie, I've got shit to do and you're a little too long. And we established the point about half an hour ago or 45 minutes ago. Let's, like, what's the next step? What's the next payoff? What's the next reveal? What's the next anything? Anything at all? And yeah, we've got, the best they can do is give us a charming bad guy in Chris Pine. And honestly, charming bad guy Chris Pine might be the best Chris Pine outside of Joe Carnahan Chris Pine. And he handles this material really well. He's got that feeling of, it's like I said, it feels like almost a cult of sorts, and the fact that he's at the center of that and kind of in control of that. Perfectly cast. I would have loved to have seen more of him in it, and more of this performance in it. And the fact that he can sort of, you know, match up with Florence Pugh, because obviously Florence Pugh hasn't been around for very long, but she's established herself so hard that she might as well be one of the big guns right now. And as far as Harry Styles goes, once again, it's like you can tell that he was kind of a last minute replacement, and he does what he can, but it's like you do wonder what the dynamic between these two characters would have been like if it was an actor with a bit more experience and it was somebody that was a bit more capable of matching somebody that's at Pugh's caliber at this point. So it's like he's not bad at all, but it just, somebody with just a bit more experience that could have reached that with Pugh and kind of really gone head to head with Pugh would have been probably much more interesting. So there is that. But yeah, so I don't really know if there's anything else I can say. I already feel like I've said too much, quite honestly. But like I said, the movie's just so desperate to get out there. I don't know what, you know, is even considered a spoiler and what isn't. But that's more or less how I feel about this. Like I said, just very, very unsatisfying, despite, you know, a lot of setup. But mostly just, you know, repetitive and dull and obvious around all of its corners. You can see, like, all of its wheels turning and what it's trying to do and what it's trying to pull off. Just ultimately leaving. If anything, the biggest surprise of the movie is how ultimately unsatisfying all the reveals are. So, that's, I think that's pretty much how I can leave that. So, let's go on to the greatest beer run ever, which I was not expecting to talk about this soon, but I can tell you a little bit of why we're talking about it right now. And if you hadn't heard, you may have possibly vaguely heard about this whole thing that Regal Theaters were doing. Where, like a month or so ago, they were talking about having a mystery movie, they were calling it, where it was only a $5 ticket. It was going to be a movie that wasn't out yet, and you would go to the theater and you would not know what the movie was literally until it started. And I'm actually pretty surprised they managed to pull that off without it getting out of what the movie was. Like, I'm pretty sure when I went in at 7 o'clock, nobody knew what it was until it started. And I knew exactly what it was when it started because of the Apple logo. And it's like, because I had heard about it enough, that it was like, because our theater doesn't get, you know, Apple movies or Netflix movies or anything like that. So it was like, immediately it was like, oh, this is, like, that was like the one bit where it was like people seemed really disappointed, to say the least, that this is the movie that it ended up being after all the hype. Probably because people had their expectations awfully high. People were expecting like people were probably expecting a Marvel movie or something. And I kind of had a feeling it would be something pretty like middle of the road. So it's like, honestly, the one reason that I'm happy it was this movie was, it's like, I probably wouldn't have seen this movie in theaters otherwise, because I don't think we're going to actually have this when it comes out. So there's some kind of novelty to it. Um, so yeah, and then I'd say maybe 6 people walked out. Like the 2 people in front of me walked out after the first 10 or 15 minutes or so. Maybe probably was hoping to get a refund, and then probably like the halfway mark, I think 2 more couples eventually left. But the theater was full, and it was a big theater, and so only 6 people is a small number to walk out for going into a movie they didn't know what it was. So it held attention that long if you're looking for like a wide reaction idea. But here I wasn't really. I know it was. We got Peter Farrelly fresh off a Green Book, and now he's kind of trying to go this different direction. Where it's like he's still maintaining his comedy, but now he's also trying to do like these dramatic, very embellished true stories. Where it's like he's got the Adam McKay vibe going now, to where it's like, yeah, I was known for all these really big wacky comedies, but now I kind of want to do this serious thing, but I also want to kind of keep my comedy, but also want to talk about the state of things now, and by using past events, the parallel is actually getting kind of weird, but yeah, I did get vibes from this of like, I don't know if anybody saw Richard Linklater's movie Last Flag Flying. Most people didn't. Which is excellent if you want to check it out. I was kind of getting vibes of that a little bit, like a lesser version of that movie with this. I was also randomly reminded of a movie from the 80s I don't think anybody's heard of, called Let's Get Harry. It had like Mark Harmon and Gary Busey and Thomas F. Wilson and stuff. A movie that's not very well liked, but I kind of like it, honestly. It's like a guilty pleasure. But if on the off chance you have seen that movie, I was also somewhat getting the vibe of that movie from this as well. And I wasn't sure how many people were figuring out what the movie was as it went. Like, I'm not sure how many people had heard of this movie that were in the theater with me. But the idea that it's set during the Vietnam War, and it's this half-true story from the little research that I did, where this guy, all his friends are out in the Vietnam War, so he wants to go out there onto the active battlefield and give his friends beers from home to let them know that people still care. And it's the dilemma throughout the movie is this guy really wholesome, or is he a selfish idiot that's gonna get himself killed? Is it somewhere in between? Does he not how oblivious is he to the stakes of this and just the state of the world that it was at that time and all that? And Efron is very good in this. Efron's really been showing for a while now that he really comes to play as an actor. And the way he sort of handles this and kind of goes back and forth between serious and comedic and oblivious and like sort of sobering. And it's like whenever the moment calls for it, he can find it well enough and convey it well enough. So, and whether it be dialogue or no dialogue or whatever, he's very capable as an actor, and he's a really good casting choice for this part, and carries the movie very well, and gives it like just enough charm to where it's like even when this guy is clearly making all the wrong decisions, there's just still a charm with him where you kind of stick with him and you like hold out and you hope he doesn't get himself killed, regardless of his choices. There's some other supporting players here a little bit, obviously because it's a Farrelly movie. Bill Murray's hanging out here as the bartender back at home, and Russell Crowe is here. I remember seeing it was always like when I had always heard about this movie before this, it was always a Zac Efron Russell Crowe movie, and when you look at the poster, it says Zac Efron Russell Crowe. But we meet Russell Crowe once when he gets to Vietnam, and then Russell Crowe is not really seen again or prominent again until the last third. Which was kind of surprising. So, like, when I said Efron's carrying this movie, he's really carrying the movie on his own, pretty much, just kind of going from person to person. Where the Farrellys are Farrelly in this sense, the one, not to this level by any means, but they've always had this quality that, like, the Coen brothers have, of being able to find these actors that don't really feel like actors, that might just be kind of people from around, and kind of putting them in these parts to make them feel a bit more real, and it's like, I do kind of like that you have Efron Crowe and Bill Murray, but then everybody else is kind of somebody that you've just kind of never seen before, or at least not often. Like most of the people in this, I didn't recognize, which it does kind of feel like it gives a bit more of a real quality to in the casting department, and all those people kind of carry their parts nicely. But as far as it being a balance between comedy and drama, there are some, like I said, for people that went into a movie not sure what they were getting, there were quite a few big laughs where like the whole theater got a laugh. Like the moment when he's talking about his whole quest is about getting beer to his friends in Vietnam, and it's like, yeah, but I want to give them American beer, and then Russell Crowe just kind of glances at a guy that's clearly drinking American beer at the bar, stuff like that. And this continuous joke where he's Efron's able to get from place to place by convincing people that he's in the CIA becomes a running joke that's very funny whenever it comes up. I like the fact that there are running jokes in this movie, and none of them really seem to run out of steam. Like, usually that's, like, the first thing that happens to a running joke, but, the running jokes in this are actually able to kind of maintain their life throughout it. There's a moment, and just, like I said, there's, like, these throwaway characters and these throwaway lines, that can just hit big with the right delivery. There is a point where Efron asks a guy, how's the food? And it's one of the most unexpected, yet not wrong answers that I've heard to that question. So there's moments like that that really stick out. There's a side character we run into a couple of times that's just referred to as Oklahoma, where he's a traffic cop that he has this sort of a couple of nice moments with Efron that ultimately have a payoff. I do think, as far as when it gets to the drama, the individual dramatic moments I do think work. I think it's much more of a case of the movie may not work as much when you stop and look at it as a whole, but it's like I feel like the individual moments work well enough. Where like we have particular dramatic beats, or there's a moment where, like I said, he has like maybe a sobering moment when he realizes what he's gotten himself into, and it's like I feel like those work well enough. But I do think what was really interesting about seeing this movie the way that I did, with this unsuspecting crowd, was going into it when everybody was trying to theorize what this mystery movie was going to be. A lot of people were talking about, like, is it going to be Smile? Is it going to be Bros? And stuff like that. And the debate was, well, Smile and Bros both have very specific audiences. And so it's like, I feel like if they're doing this mystery movie thing, they want to do something that's going to be very broad, like have a very broad appeal, so they don't piss anybody off. And so it's like, and that really highlights how safe the movie feels, because it was like, because the whole time I was watching, I was like, how are these, like, that's like, I was actually kind of nervous going into this showing, because I knew it was in one of the big theaters and that it was packed. And so it was like, whatever this happens to be, the reaction from everybody is going to be what's... and so it's like it's almost like they intentionally went for a movie that was going to be as harmless as possible. And so I think, like I said, now that that's been highlighted, I feel like it kind of shows maybe potentially a weakness of the movie, where like maybe it's a little too, like, trying really hard to make sure it doesn't upset anybody. So that kind of, and given the kind of movie that it is, you would think there would be a bit more conviction behind it, but I think because of that feeling of, like, safeness, I guess you could say, it doesn't really feel like it reaches, like, it almost feels uncertain about itself at times, where it's like you're not even quite sure, like, and yeah, there is, complicated gray matters as far as an area goes, where it's like, a lot of things aren't just, oh, I feel this one way and the other way is wrong. There is definitely going to be, a gray space here, but like I said, the fact that it doesn't even necessarily feel like that, even. It just kind of feels like the movie itself is uncertain, and, like I said, doesn't want to piss anybody off. And so just, like, maybe just not, like, a whole, oh, this thing is absolutely right and that thing is absolutely wrong, but, like, just a little bit more conviction of just what it was saying in general, I feel like, would have maybe given it a little something that's probably missing. Like I said, that's when you, like, kind of stop and look at it as a whole. like I said, when you're watching the movie itself, the individual moments feel like they work well enough, the comedy and the drama. But it's just kind of overall how it feels at the end of everything. It feels like there's something missing here. And like I said, I think it's just that little bit more conviction in itself, that confidence in itself, that it probably could have used. I can see why this has like a 30 something on Rotten Tomatoes, because I'm sure people are gonna, because obviously, Green Book, as soon as Green Book won Best Picture, everybody suddenly hated it. And was like, oh, it's manipulative and it's a lie and whatever the hell else. Because I think Green Book is fine for what it was, if you're aware that it's not accurate. And yeah, and it does seem like it's pandering and maybe condescending or something. And I get where people could feel that way. But it's... I feel like it's fine, but like I said, just the fact that it's just fine might be a problem for what it's trying to tackle, and what it's trying to portray. And it's, yeah, but like I said, the whole accuracy to real life thing is never something that's bothered me that much. That's why you just go read the books that these people write, or watch documentaries or something, and that's what you want, because everything that gets a movie made about it is going to be Hollywoodified in some way, and you should just know that at this point. And if you don't, you're just really, really far behind. So, if that's not what you want out of a movie, then you should probably stop watching these kinds of movies, because I don't think that's going to change anytime soon. So, so yeah, it's fine. Like I said, is that a good thing for movies like this? That probably should be a little more than fine, given what their subject matter. Whatever. But as far as it being harmless, if that's what they were going for, they accomplished it. But like I said, I guess it's up to you and the audience whether that's a good thing or not. But yeah, it does feel like just a little bit's missing, and that's my only problem with it. But it's okay. It's fine to me. So I guess we'll end on Confess, Fletch. Which is, I feel like forever we've been hearing about, oh, there's going to be another Fletch movie. There was a long time ago when it was going to be Kevin Smith and Jason Lee. And honestly, back then, and even now, I just really didn't care one way or the other. I hated the first Fletch movie when I saw it when I was younger. When I was, like 11 or 12 or something. It just felt so pointless to me. But I did see it later in life, and I did find more appreciation for it. And I think what honestly was holding me back from liking it as a kid was how much of it went by me. Not necessarily because it's like jokes going over your head or anything like that, but it's just I wasn't appreciating how I didn't notice how rapid fire everything is in Fletch, and Chevy Chase's deliveries and the jokes and stuff like that, and just how quickly, like how many jokes are going by all at once. So it's like I was able to appreciate that more as I got older, and so even with finding that appreciation though, I still just feel like it almost feels like the way Fletch is portrayed as that character is so inherently Chevy Chase that it's like I was kind of wondering why people were so like, oh, this character needs to, have another incarnation or whatever. I didn't know for a very, very long time that there are Fletch books. I had no idea of that, and I have no idea if they reflect like the comedy or if they're more dramatic or whatever, but I did know going into this that Greg Mottola was the director, and that honestly seemed pretty, like, suited. Like, it's usually when you see the director on a movie like this, is, like, kind of make or break. And it's like, when I saw that Mottola was doing it, it was like, that actually makes sense. I can actually see that, and feel like it could work. And then with John Hamm playing the character, where John Hamm has shown that he has that balance where he can be very, very, he can very much be the straight man, and then he can also go all out with comedy if need be. So it's like, okay, that's okay. I'm sure this could work. Like I said, it's just my total lack of passion for Fletch as a character that was kind of holding me back. But it's like, yeah, I feel like this, could at least... I think the idea basically is to be at least up to par with, the first movie. But I guess when you're somebody like me, that's a much lower bar. where it's like I definitely appreciate that first movie, but I don't think it's like, you know, one of the peak comedies of its era or anything like that. But it is sort of like almost peak Chevy Chase in a sense, where like it's Chevy Chase doing what he did best, with that sort of dry delivery and that sort of like where it's like he's not necessary. He's definitely not the brightest person in the room, but he certainly feels like he might be. With just a slight awareness every now and then that peeks through, and it's like, well, maybe he does know what's going. There's a lot of stuff going on, and just in general, like that whole '80s era of Chevy Chase kind of felt like it kind of culminated in this character a little bit, and it's like there I can see what the appeal was, but now it comes time to doing this again with another actor in 2022. I don't know, because, and I think another thing that I feel like doesn't exactly suit this character to do multiple movies is the fact that the whole idea of Fletch kind of seems to be more about the individual scenes and the individual bits than it is a plot. I think that's another thing that really put me off when I saw it as a kid, and I thought, like, you know, this is the most pointless movie I've ever seen. And it's like no scene feels connected to the other, and it's like every time he does a disguise or whatever, it feels just so shoehorned and so unnecessary. Which, once again, clearly was the joke to an extent, but here we do get those moments, and we do get that same vibe. It's more about the individual scenes and bits than it is the plot itself. I don't even know I could tell you the details of the plot. It involves paintings. Riveting. And it's like, that's basically just here to be able to put him in certain situations that he has to do these things, and we get his run-ins with different characters like Lucy Punch. He has kind of a fun scene with. There's a scene where he gets caught snooping around Kyle MacLachlan's boat and has to talk his way out of that. But there's no... The big problem in this particular movie, I think, is that even though Ham can handle this, I feel like, there's no, like, big scenes. There's no, like, big... Like, usually in movies like this, you have a great scene that's like a centerpiece scene, where it's like, if nothing else, you know, see the movie for this scene. This is the scene where they really nail it. It's usually a scene, like, right in the middle of the movie. And there's no... I feel like there were no big laughs in it. And it's like, it's almost kind of hard to say the original movie had big laughs in it, because, like I said, the jokes are so rapid fire, you don't even really have time for a big laugh. You have time for a lot of, like, oh, that's funny, and then, oh, that's fun, and then just pretty much that. But, like, I mean, I would say, for me, maybe the biggest laugh in the original movie is when he starts singing Moon River at in the doctor's office. But, like, even that, you know, isn't, like, a scene that's, like, a big... Like, when I think of, like, what I'm thinking of, I think it's more, like, the idea of setup and payoff being these big things in comedy, where it's, like, we get this really, really big build-up, and then there's just one big laugh we've been building to this whole time. Like, it's all these little individual moments that are just jokes within themselves, and every now and then there are jokes that, like, keep coming back, but it's still, like, there's... Yeah, by then it kind of feels like we're expecting the punchlines, because they've been sort of, like, been a running joke for so long, but it's more about those, like, little line deliveries, like when it feels like he's channeling Chevy Chase in his delivery is when the movie's probably peaking, and that's not necessarily a good sign for a reboot of sorts, or whatever you want to call this. So we have moments when he says, like, when he introduces himself, or he's about to introduce himself, and somebody calls him Mr. Fletcher, and he says, oh no, only my mother calls me Mr. Fletcher. And it's like lines like that where you almost don't catch them right away. Like, you kind of have to have a moment to process what he even said for you to realize he said something funny. The biggest example of this is probably my favorite line in the movie, is when he goes to somebody's house and they, you know, offer him food or something, and he says, oh, no thanks, I ate yesterday. And it's and it's like little lines like that, I feel like, are what, you know, show off what makes the character so appealing. So there's not really going to be a big, broad nature to him that you'd expect in like a centerpiece scene like the kind I was talking about. But even so, there's just going to be kind of something unsatisfying at the end of all of it. Because, yeah, you have these little bits, but then by the time you get to the end, it just doesn't really feel like nothing's really hit, whether it be comedically or certainly not story-wise or whatever. Um, yeah, there's like as far as him getting out of situations, like the scene with the boat and stuff like that, you'd almost expect like something where it's like where he's like really really big and in danger, and he's got to really really work to slither his way out of something, and I don't feel like there's any of that here at all. And it's like honestly, the funniest bits are when he just does like comes up with one thing immediately that gets him out of a situation. Like when he's in an Uber at one point, and he has to get the guy to stop the car, and they're in like a tunnel, and the guy says, "There's no way I'm stopping this car right now," and so just very nonchalantly he says, "Okay, do you have something up there I can vomit into?" And that's what gets the guy to stop the car and kick him out. And so stuff like that, where it's like these little moments that work, and they're great. But that's just it. Is we never get past the little moments. I don't feel like. So it's just a whole lot of, yeah, these things are working individually. Oh shit, the movie's over. Oh, we've reached the climax very suddenly, and it's like we keep saying a whole lot of different characters' names, but there's no real mystique to the mystery element of it. And it's like it's not even a case where you're like trying to figure out the case for yourself. You're just like kind of just going from scene to scene, just hearing them say names and talk about what sound like plot developments, but everything's just so uninteresting and so unintriguing. It doesn't matter. I feel like we've come full circle talking about Don't Worry, Darling, with the trying, to have a mystery, have an intrigue, and it's just not here, and everything's unsatisfying. Um, if there is one joke that I do really like that runs throughout it is, I'm not quite sure how to say this actress's name. Aiden Mary, maybe? The other cop that he keeps having run-ins with. I feel like a movie with the two of them, honestly, would have been great. And it's like if it was the two of them working together a little bit. I know Fletch is kind of his own thing, but he also had Gina Davis in the other movie, kind of. And it's like I do feel like this is a character that could really play. That's the thing, is he kind of the way he plays off others. So it's kind of surprising that for the most part he seems to work alone. Because you probably could have something here if he played off a character like this other cop character. Because all of their scenes are quite funny together. In a moment where you would think those scenes would be run into the ground because it's such a running joke, but no, those are like the best scenes in the movie pretty much. So yeah, and you have other side characters here. From great actors like Marcia Gay Harden and Kyle MacLachlan are playing, these side characters with like big personalities. But that's the thing also is like having them all have big personalities, and it's like the idea that Fletch is supposed to kind of seem like the one that's weird, but like when everybody else is weird, it's not really, because like the first movie he's surrounded by like all kinds of shady characters and serious characters, and it makes him stand out more as a character. And it's like here, it's like everybody's weird and everybody's wacky, and it doesn't really. So it gives his character really no impact. There is also John Slattery is here also, and at first I was wondering like is Slattery gonna be is it gonna be distracting seeing the two of them working together again? It's like as soon as you see him, it's like couldn't they have cast Bradley Whitford or something that would have been less distracting. But no, once they start interacting, it still works pretty well. So that was actually kind of nice. But yeah, like I was at the end of the day, though, whether it be story or comedy, it just feels so slight, and there's like no passion in it. Like you heard about Kevin Smith and Jason Lee really wanting to make their movie, and how we heard about that forever. It feels like there's like no passion in this one, like whatsoever. Like it's. Like, you don't get the vibe that somebody saw the original movie and just loved it so much and had to make this movie. It doesn't really feel like anybody had to make this movie. I'm not sure. Like, it just feels very, like I said, slight and nonchalant about its existence. So that's So it just is existing. Like, I've said more about it than I really even expected to. So we're probably just talking in circles in this point is what that means. So we can probably just go ahead and end this. So yeah. So like I said, I really want to get to the Woman King and see how they run and stuff like that. And other, like I was talking about, like Barbarian and Pearl and all the horror releases and stuff like that will kind of be in another review video next month. Probably in at least a week or two. I'll talk about those all at once, and then we'll be doing all the other stuff. So we're getting close to finishing out September here. Just a couple more, or just one more of the William Hurt videos, like one more of the remake verses, and then a few more to finish out the month, and then we'll be in October and all that. So until whatever the next thing is, I think that's it.